that is an important part of it, absolutely. But also, like, who is benefiting from the jobs as well while these construction projects are taking place? Are those units being built? Are they including commercial units? I will come back to homes. I just want to kind of pick on a couple of other things, all right? Because also, you know, if commercial units are being put in, are they being then rented out at peppercorn rent to small medium enterprises that might be being run by local people in those areas? You know, those are important things, and those are things, and they've been some of the conversations we've been having recently with local communities around one particular development in St Paul's called Dove Lane, which many of you may well be familiar with. It's been derelict, I think, certainly for as long as I've been in Bristol, and I came here in 2008. And I think probably all the way back to 2002, people have been saying we're going to build it for many years. And so the latest ones are going to go and have at least got planning permission or an updated planning permission in places for people. 20% affordable is what they're proposing to do. And so we've been saying to them, we want more from you. You need to be doing more than 20%. 20% isn't enough. But also, local community are rightly asking, right, and are those jobs laying the bricks and the other jobs on the building site, are they going to be for us? Are we going to get some of those jobs? So that is an important aspect too, and it's a question that the developer needs to answer. And so one of the other things we've been looking at as well, and that the council has set up, is something called Building Bristol. You can Google it and have a look, which is about saying that new planning permission, sort of new planning applications that have come in since April have now got to submit a jobs and skills plan that's identifying how you're creating jobs for local people and what the benefits are going to be from these developments that are going up. So I just wanted to kind of cover those two things. But coming back to homes, of course, we need more social housing, we need more council housing, as well as housing that's coming from housing associations. You want to get the benefit bill down, spend more money on building more social housing, and then you'll get that bill down quickly because you won't be wasting it all in private landlords' pockets.
Can I put that? Sorry.
I just want to jump. Dove Lane, that's like a little pet project. Like that was 2003. Now, when that thing went through, first of all, that was meant to have 40% social housing built into it. And that's why that land was sold to them. That's the old corrugated cardboard factory that used to be there. And through that being put in place, and then St Paul's Unlimited being set up in St Paul's, that was meant to help deal with this for the community. We actually set up a plan at the time, and it was a St Paul's Housing Protocol. Because Bristol City Council, Knightstone Housing Association, and Bristol Churches, which is now places for people, all agreed that they're going to sell their social housing stock, lots of their social housing stock here in St Paul's. That was going to be reallocated into Dove Lane. So they said, we're going to get rid of these houses, which, and all they did with a lot of the houses and the flats and properties, they suddenly said were unfit to be sold on to people. They tried to put them straight into auction. But what they did is they just boarded them all up. And then they wouldn't let people have access to them for like 6 months, 9 months. But they also allowed them to be squatted. But they wouldn't allow them to go back on the housing register list. And then all of a sudden, these properties, we started seeing them, so they turned up at auction. All of a sudden, it's up for sale, it's up for sale. So the community put a stop to that. So the group you're talking to now, they're trying to reenact what the community was doing 15, 18 years ago. It goes through the same processes, it goes to the same people, and the only people that profit are the developers. So in 2008-9, when the crash came, places for people got to get the whole social quota taken off the list. So you're saying that we're looking to get 20% affordable. It should be 40% social. And when we talk about affordable, that's just like for who? It's not affordable for the working class.
Absolutely.
It's affordable for the affluent class.
Absolutely.
So affordable, really, when I hear affordable, it means nothing to me. What I want to hear is social housing. I want to know that you can get a 3-bedroom house, be on £500 a month rent or £400 a month rent. So you could be working, maybe you want to be a mechanic. Maybe you want to work at the warehouse, maybe you want to work there, but you still have a right to be able to live. And what we've lost is the social housing. And until we get social housing, exactly what you said earlier, about mixed communities, where we've got people from all economic incomes living together, that's the only way you have a caring society where we're all looking out for each other. But Dove Lane, that's been signed, sealed, and delivered. And I'll tell you what, that group that's talking, there's nowhere for them to go because it's already all been signed off. So you can go back 15 years and see what's been done. And what happens is, no disrespect to others, new people come in and then they get sold the line. But as you're being sold the line, time is ticking by and it's moving on. Like the group you're talking to, they were told they could be part of this new planning process. And while they were waiting to have a meeting, they found out that the planning was passed. It's like... Which is painful.
Matt, I'll come to you now, just in the context of that, absolutely, Orwell, what is it? Euphemisms, enemy of truth. Affordable, in the context of affordable housing, redefined 2011 through Johnson partly to be up to 80% of market rate. Absolute euphemism. Affordable for who? Absolutely. Yeah, man.
Yeah, no, I was just going to come on to the affordable social thing, which probably people are well aware of, but that does include shared ownership. It does include up to 80% market rent. It does include kind of key worker. Potentially as well, whereas social rent, as you say, is kind of guided by kind of national policy, but roughly kind of 50%-ish market rent. Forgotten what I was going to say now.
Where's the question? I got.
Oh, sorry, yeah, it was just going back to Tom's point around the sort of socio-economic piece around, labour markets, and actually we need to connect, the local colleges, the local schools, the local education plans into the developments, because quite often what we find is we're building out sites and there might be a local plan saying supply local labour, but it literally isn't there, and I think we do look at how we can do that much more effectively than we are doing now.
Question which might be good for you two, but if anybody wants to chip in, feel free, is when it comes to the provision of real affordable housing, real social housing that local people can afford.
Yep.
How much of an obstacle is the viability assessment? Just looking at that, and maybe explain what the viability assessment is as well.
Can I just pick up one of the points? Sorry, on that, and that's what I was going to say before. Sorry, my head bounces around a lot. Henry gets this all the time. Manchester city centre has no percentage of social or affordable housing at all. And I sent Henry a link earlier around that, and I think the viability point is a developer kind of question mark, and quite often we see sites that developers will not take as viable, and we kind of take them on and we make them work. So the developers are kind of there to make a profit, we're there to make a surplus and reinvest, and I think there's just that kind of viability thing, and going back to your point around boarding up homes, we do have a challenge in this country around the age of our housing, and it is old and it is getting older, and I'm not saying it couldn't be reinvested in, but we've got a huge ticking time bomb in terms of an ageing population and an ageing stock profile of housing, and that is a massive challenge around how do we regenerate to not create gentrification. And the viability point, I'll hand over to Tom, but it's a big one there.
Yeah, it is.
Just sorry, Tom. Would you mind explaining just briefly what the viability assessment is and what sort of obstacles it puts up there?
So the cynic in me would say the viability assessment is a way of developers getting out of providing affordable housing or social housing on a development, and we've seen that a lot over the years. So what they have to do is demonstrate they're not going to make enough profit. They're allowed to make, I think it's about 20% profit from their development, assuming they haven't hidden costs all over the place as well to artificially inflate or deflate it. And then they can use that to say, well, we can't meet your 40%, your 30%, your 20% requirement for this area. Other things that can complicate it, though, to be fair, are things like brownfield sites, land that's been previously built on. Is it contaminated land? Are there issues that you've got to deal with on that site? That will put up costs, but that's at the core of what the viability assessment is. And I think back to one of the Acorn campaigns I was involved in many years ago, was the chocolate factory site in Easter, which I think at one time was proposing no affordable housing, and it kicked off, and it was actually the thing that really kicked it off and got everyone looking at how we make sure that they can't get out of that anymore, and really started to see a bit of a shift in more, forgive me using the term affordable housing, it's the catch-all term, on developments. There was some on the chocolate factory in the end, but it was all shared ownership, about 20%, and it's not good enough. And so what we've seen more and more since is the way we even define affordable, if I'm just talking about the rented side rather than affordable home ownership, we don't accept 80% of market rate as affordable in Bristol. It's got to be at the local housing allowance rates or below, and that might be 80%, not likely to be.
So we've heard the cynical Tom Renard.
I'm always a cynic.
And the cynical, the cynical Tom Maynard says as well, it's private developers just finding any excuse not to build X amount of affordable housing. What does the realist Tom Maynard say about the viability assessment in terms of how much of an obstacle it puts up when it comes to providing affordable housing? In other words, is there room for revision there? Could it be changed a little bit in tandem with a redefinition of what is affordable housing? Why not have both?
So what I would say is we've got a council-owned house building company in their pipeline of almost 3,000 homes. 48% of those will meet the definition of affordable, and the majority of those will be social rent. So if we can get a 48% average on our housing developments, and not all of those are simple sites, then there's no reason that the developers could not if they wanted to do so. But there are some challenges though that I will be real about, which is the cost of building homes at the moment is astronomical and it's through the roof. There are problems with labour, there's problems with inflation, Brexit has caused problems as well now to the cost of building, and it's becoming increasingly challenging. And so increasingly both us as a council and also housing associations are reliant on grants from government in order to get houses built. And I think housing associations in particular have been very lucky to tap into what's called the Affordable Housing Grants Programme, which is I think it's about 11-12 billion over 5 years, which is being put in to increase the numbers of affordable units that can get built by filling in that subsidy gap that there is between the cost of getting it built and ensuring you can then have an affordable rent, a social rented or a shared ownership.
Can you just say on that? So with the, if there's one industry which has done really well since 2008, it's the private developer industry. You look at that sector, you look at the billions that have been made, and thinking about and then the pushback that they give sometimes when it comes to prospect developments. Oh, this won't be viable. Specifically on that question about the viability assessment, do you think there could be a bit more leeway there of actually perhaps less than 20% could be reasonable as a projected net profit?
So sometimes it depends what levers you've got. So on sites where perhaps we own the land, we're the freeholder, but maybe there was some ridiculous lease deal agreed many years ago, and there's a leaseholder with 125 years to run on the lease. Then we've got more leverage to go, well actually we want the 30%, it's like the current site in Bedminster Green, which is the one plot 5, the unit the council has ownership of, still not been built, still not in planning, because one thing we're insisting on is you've got to meet 30% affordable that we're saying. So if you've got those levers, but it's a privately owned site and they can evidence their viability, then it's hard for councils.
Okay, I want to go to the next question if that's right, unless there was anything burning on that one.
I don't want to say something just about the viability and the affordability of building properties and everything. Like since 2008-9, say to 2020, money was practically free to buy. It was at like 0.1%, like literally at some place. And if you go for a big loan, so I just couldn't get that the councils and local authorities weren't using that moment then to build social housing.
We weren't allowed to.
On their sites.
We weren't allowed to.
Why weren't you able to?
Legally, we weren't allowed to. We weren't allowed to borrow against our council housing stock until I think it was about 2018. The change in Theresa May. So we have started to, and we've said
and that's where housing associations tended to borrow against their housing steer. I was just going to come into that point, Henry, because actually on the sort of viability point, we will take on sites quite often that the developers don't take on because they want that 20% profit, they want it quickly, they want to move on, whereas we look at actually sort of towns and rural areas over a much longer period of time. And actually we've got a number of sites within Bristol that we're developing out there, kind of ex-factory sites or ex-car plots and things like that basically developers don't even look at, but we're providing quite significant amounts of housing on that.
All right. Really quick one. When it comes to combating the affordable housing endemic, does it matter if it's council or housing association properties that are being built?
Is this where we need to start sparring?
My preference would be council housing, but if it's solely council housing you're delivering, you're not going to deliver enough quick enough, and so it's got to be about all routes it's available for. For me, what actually matters is the tenure. Is it social rented properties that we're building that are truly affordable for people to access. Actually, that's the thing that's most important to me. And you know, it's about as many routes as possible to get as much affordable housing built as possible. But obviously, my preference is council housing. That's why we've set aside. I mean, it sounds like kind of pie in the sky really as a figure, but 1.8 billion to build 9,000 council homes. That's over 30 years. You know, it's 300 a year because that's what we can afford to do and what we can afford to borrow. So, but you know, that's why it's important we work with housing associations because of the access to money and funding and other things that you've got.
Yeah, you know, for me this isn't a kind of a war of council versus housing association. I think for me it's about supply, and you know, there's lots of other small local community land trusts and self-build and lots of different initiatives that can build housing. I think there is that thing of you know, where do we leverage the private sector, and we are doing joint ventures with private sector organisations where we split that risk and go in kind of 50-50. So we are building, you know, extensions to towns and cities with joint venture partners where we are able then to provide much more affordable housing and the social infrastructure, the schools, the kind of football pitches, etc., which weren't then necessarily going to be built. So I think the big thing for me is actually the release of land, and if you look at some of the major, particularly public sector land holding, it isn't released for housing, and it could be quite quickly. And I think those are the things that central government could do to pivot quite quickly to help the economic situation that we're in at the moment as well, and assist councils and housing associations to develop more.
All right, thank you. So I might rephrase this question, but I'll ask it, and if it doesn't make sense, then I'll write it in English. So, what barriers can there be that manifest between a community's pre-existing residents and gentrifiers, and can these be reconciled? So, in other words, when a more affluent type of person moves into a traditionally working class community, what sorts of problems can result every day to whatever? And have you experienced any? Have you ever? Has anything ever happened for you? Or whatever you got, whatever. I'll rephrase it for a third time. So you imagine you got a working class community that's working class. Yeah?
We're with you so far.
Yeah. And this community is going through a process of gentrification, where a more affluent person is moving into that community because the houses are relatively cheap compared to, say, I don't know, maybe they're from a posher end of Bristol, or maybe they're from London. You know, there's a reason that there's a bigger net migration of Londoners to Bristol every year rather than the other way around. And increasingly so the case for Bristolians over to Wales. But anyway, so you got gentrified now. You got more posh people moving into this community. You got those hashtag working class people who it's funny the first time who were there. What sort of problems can result?
I think even the term gentrification is kind of nice.
Is kind of what? Sorry?
It kind of sounds kind of nice. It kind of glosses it up a little bit, because really it boils down often to social and ethnic cleansing. That's what it really actually is. And one of the terms, an old term, was they said when the WASPs come, which stood for White Anglo-Saxon Protestants, when they decide that your neighbourhood is attractive, and what they will do then, a group will come, there comes to this thing of you not being listened to, and all of a sudden they will set up, people coming in who are more affluent will be heard, will set up a forum, or will set up a community group. But that community group then is listened to, where the others aren't. And then it's allowed, because the city wants it to think that everybody wants the property prices to go up in business and in this. The banks want the properties to go up because they can lend more against it. They can do this to hold everybody in. So it comes to this thing about having mixed communities that stay mixed communities. And it's a thing about all people caring for each other. And really, this is what the huge problem is in this line. You see it now, we're starting here complaining about what's happening around here. But those of other places in Bristol, it's happened. And until it touched Stokes Croft was quite happy being slightly different. But just know that it happened in St Paul's, which is right next door. And all the services went, so services go to help the working class. So centres and places and now all of this slowly get taken out. So it happens over a duration of time, but other people are aware of what goes on when you watch. But I just think even the name gentrification is kind of glossy.
So I've got a challenge on that point, and then come to you, Matt. That's okay. So if you don't know, what you'll generally find with gentrified communities is like you were saying, ethnic cleansing, basically, right? Culture, all these other sorts of things. So for example, it's exactly like you say. So in the ward of Ashley, which has St Paul's and other communities, between 2001 2011, actually the Jamaican, and it's Jamaican mostly. It's not Caribbean. It's mostly Jamaican Bristolian population reduced from about 16% to about 8%. Incidentally. The white community also reduced as a percentage. We'll see what that's going to be like in the census, which is out within the next few months, to see if it's the same. What happened actually? There was a big influx of Somali diaspora that moved in. But generally speaking, like you say, there is an ethnic cleansing process that happens. At the same time, you say that gentrification sounds glossy. The origins of the word, right, is the old French gentil. Excuse me if you actually speak French, but which means noble, right? Noble or high-born. And so, like I alluded to earlier, whenever you're talking about gentrification, you're always talking about a higher class of person replacing or supplanting a lower socioeconomic class of person. So is it possible to accept both of those negatives?
I'm not going to answer that question.
It's an open question.
But I'm going to make another point, which again I think kind of touches on what Lawrence was saying around, and again it's probably more kind of a national picture, is we focus so much on GDP and growth, and we can't continue to consume and grow in the way that we are as a country and as a species on the planet. You know, we need to think about well-being as value, and at the moment all of our kind of policy-driven initiatives are all about economic growth, not about well-being. And actually, if you look at some of those populations that have been driven out, the well-being is there. Their well-being is very high. Actually, they're very happy in those communities, even if the infrastructure isn't there, even if their housing is not as it should be, because actually the community is there. And actually, some of the things that we need to start doing, and I know Bristol are very kind of keen on this, is how do we grow from the ground up, and how do we create that infrastructure and that community and that well-being in a way that actually doesn't necessarily then need that value from private equity, etc.
Yeah, following on from both those points in terms of like making people listened and heard, and kind of elevating the issues that already exist in communities and elevating those issues beyond, you know, all this kind of new development that happens as a result of gentrification. And like with what Matt was saying about, you know, building those community strength from the ground up, that is, you know, essentially what Acorn as a union is doing. It's going out and speaking to residents of areas across Bristol, and essentially in really simple terms asking people, what are the issues that you face day to day? What is an issue you see in your community that you want to see changed? And what we see through, you know, door knocking and public outreach in that way is there are overwhelmingly like common issues that blanket communities, which a lot of people want to see changed, whether it be, you know, a lack of reliable public transport links, or completely skyrocketing rents, a complete lack of housing that's available to people. There are key issues which you can frame and kind of build a real community strength around, and a kind of feeling of community solidarity. I think what we see a lot through the work Acorn does, particularly in like really horrendous circumstances of evictions, are the true kind of community strength that comes out when your neighbour is being evicted, and you get a real show of solidarity from neighbours, whether or not they're new residents or old, or kind of or young and or old. All these people coming out and standing up for their neighbour because this is a really atrocious event that's happened. And I think by framing issues that exist in communities as issues that more often than not are common issues for lots of people, what you would allow to happen is this kind of real building relationships, which can then found the basis of true change and change that works for all people, not just a specific group of people in a gentrified area, essentially.
Thank you. This is the next question. Stereotypically, the telltale signs of gentrification are trendy cafes, artists.
What you got against artists?
It's the telltale signs. It's just brand new clothes made to look secondhand. No offense. Is there anything inherently wrong with an oat milk latte?
It's also a comedian.
I think there's definitely something to be said for, you know, this kind of like stereotyped images of what gentrification is, and I think without a doubt the kind of homogenizing of communities to just have, you know, nice little cafes and bistros and stuff like that is inherently a really awful thing, and really destructive and divides and fractures communities. But I think what is potentially dangerous in focusing too heavily on those stereotypes is it kind of distracts the target of gentrification and who is responsible for gentrification away from the people that genuinely hold the power and the wealth and call the shots on why communities are changing at such a rapid rate, and diverts it to, you know, your neighbour and the person across the street who more often than not is probably on, you know, a very low wage like you are, or is also renting in private accommodation and getting ripped off by their landlord. It's kind of ignoring the real target and shifting the blame onto each other, which is exactly what, you know, the people who are truly responsible for gentrification want, because if you've got fractured communities, if you've got divide, that's going to make it a lot easier to, you know, develop a massive high-rise building, because people aren't going to show up and show out for each other. Like I was just saying in the previous point, you know, it fractures that sense of solidarity and commonness that we need to resist against the forces of gentrification.
Anybody else?
I mean, I can't say I'm keen on oat milk lattes, but that's just a personal thing. But I mean, jokes aside, I mean, I agree with most of that. I think the one thing I would say though is whether it's high rise or not, I don't think is necessarily the issue. It's more about the tenure of what's being built. I don't know, everyone's keen on high rise, so probably just opening a massive can of worms for myself. But you know, there is that broader point as well around where we're building, as well as who we're building for. Because if we want to protect green spaces and we're going to build enough homes, then there is that conversation around height and density. Obviously, density doesn't always mean loads and loads and loads of height. You know, there are ways, and I think it's quite common in parts of Europe, for example, to achieve high density with mid-rise. But you know, if you're going to building up more in the centre where you can build in active travel, where there might be more opportunities to have good transport infrastructure, good walking routes, good cycling routes, you know, is some things that we should consider too. And, you know, it brings me back always to that point of, is gentrification a bad thing? Yes, if it's not benefiting local communities.
Yeah. And final question, then we'll open it up to everyone. We're really good to hear your views. Is it inevitable? The question of the night: is it inevitable that Bristol will become gentrified?
I think we'll see when we get a change of power at the top, because right, we want to bring him into the conversation. When you're a mayor of a city saying the city's never seen so many cranes on its skyline,